You're listening to audio from Cities Church. You can find more resources and learn about our ministry by visiting citieschurch.com.
Well, the passage that you just heard this morning comes from the end of a narrative section in Numbers, and it comes right in the middle of the chapters that we're going to cover this morning. So we're walking through chapters 16, 17, 18, and 19. We see that this is at the heart of the book of Numbers, not only at the heart of this passage this morning, but at the heart of the book of Numbers. And this has also been a theme in the whole Pentateuch. The question that's been asked is, how can an unholy people come near a holy God? Or vice versa, how can a holy God come and dwell among an unholy people without them being consumed by his holy justice? So we've seen this focus in the books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible, that right at the heart, the middle, is the book of Leviticus. And right in the middle of that book is the Day of Atonement. And so we see this central theme coming throughout what Moses is writing and what we're walking through of the tabernacle and the priesthood and this question, a holy God and an unholy people. So it's not a coincidence this morning that the tabernacle and the priesthood seem to take center stage once again. We will return to this theme at the end this morning, but first we're going to look at what comes prior to what was read and what comes after what was read here in the text. In chapter 16, we see 3 distinct judgments connected with rebellion, grumbling, and unbelief. And after these 3 judgments, we'll look ahead and we see 3 provisions from God for the people of Israel in 17, 18, and 19. So that's the high-level outline this morning. 3 acts of judgment, 3 acts of provision. Would you pray again with me as we get started? Father, we thank you for your word. Help it to work in our hearts right now, Lord. Would you enter into our darkness? Would you shine your light in as we go to your word this morning? We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen. So here again, verses 12 and 13. And the people of Israel said to Moses, "Behold, we perish. We are undone. We are all undone. Everyone who comes near the tabernacle of the Lord shall die. Are we all to perish?" This is a desperate question that's in response to all that has happened in chapter 16 and the beginning of 17. Death, because of God's judgment related to sin, is all over the camp. So let's look back at these acts of judgment that lead up to the people crying to Moses here in verses 12 and 13. The first story we're going to look at encapsulates 2 acts of judgment, and it's been called Korah's rebellion. So I'm going to read Numbers 16, 1 through 19 for us. It's an extended passage. You can follow along if you'd like, if you've got it open in front of you, or if you just really want to listen well. Listen to the dialogue, listen to the characters, listen to what is said as best you can as we walk through this story here and read of Korah's rebellion in chapter 16. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" When Moses heard it, he fell on his face and said to Korah and all his company, "In the morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will bring near to him. The one whom he chooses, he will bring near to him. Do this: take censers, Korah and all his company, put fire in them and put incense on them before the Lord tomorrow. And the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi." And Moses said to Korah, "Hear now, you sons of Levi, is it too small a thing for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do service in the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation, to minister to them, and that he has brought you near to him and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. And would you seek the priesthood also? Therefore, it is against the Lord that you and all your company have gathered together. What is Aaron that you grumble against him? And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and they said, "We will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you must also make yourself a prince over us? Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up." And Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, "Do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them. I have not harmed one of them." And Moses said to Korah, "Be present, you and all your company, before the Lord, you and they and Aaron, tomorrow. And let every one of you take his censer and put incense on it. And every one of you bring before the Lord his censer. 250 censers, you also and Aaron, each the entrance of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron." Then Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. So here we have Korah, a leader among the Levites, has banded together with Dathan and Abiram, leaders from the tribe of Reuben. They've also gathered 250 well-known leaders from the whole congregation, among others with them, to rebel against the leadership of Moses and Aaron. This is not a small group of complainers. This is an organized revolt that has a sizable group with it. Besides the leaders, it says there's 250 well-known leaders in the congregation that are there with them. So we need to see a few things that's going on here to appreciate the magnitude of this terrible situation. First, we're going to do a historical flyby real quick through books prior in the Bible, and you can call this Revelation and Rivalry. So in Genesis 49, starting back then, Jacob calls all his sons, his 12 sons together, that he may tell them what is to happen in the days to come. And when he speaks to them, it says he blessed them, blessing each of them with a suitable blessing. So we have prophetic blessings here that play out in the coming generations. It gives us revelation of what is to come in the coming days. And three things in a snapshot we want to see here. First, to Reuben, he says, his firstborn, "You are preeminent in power, but you will not have preeminence." To Levi, he says, "Their weapons of violence are their swords. Their anger is fierce, and their wrath cruel." And God says, "I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." And to Judah, he says, "Your brothers shall praise you. The scepter shall not depart from Judah." Jump forward to Exodus 32, and this gives us a glimpse of this playing out for the Levites. In this infamous story here of the golden calf, Moses is delayed as he goes up the mountain. The people become restless. And along with Aaron, they make a golden calf, and they begin to worship this image. Moses comes down and sees all this wickedness and sees that the people have broken free from Aaron, and Aaron has let them do it. And he comes and says, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered around him. They are then commanded to slaughter the wickedness that's around them, and 3,000 fell that day. And then Moses said to the Levites, "Today you have been ordained for the service of the Lord, each one at the cost of his son and his brother, so that he, God, might bestow a blessing upon you this day." So the Levites are blessed for their faithfulness here as they execute judgment. And we do see their warrior-like fierceness here and an ordaining that comes on them that's going to play out later in Scripture and be fulfilled. Jump to Numbers 2. We're getting closer today. Numbers 2 gives us a glimpse of this prophetic blessing playing out for the tribe of Judah and Reuben. As the camps are ordered, Judah is placed in first position over all the brothers. He is the first of the first camp on the east side, while Reuben is listed as the first in the second camp on the south side. This could be a coincidence, but then we go to number 7 and we see that same order play out as contributions are brought to the sanctuary. Judah goes first. The firstborn tribe of Reuben does not. The tribe of Judah is leading. We go to number 3, and we see the redeeming of the firstborn from all the tribes. So rather than all the firstborns of all the tribes coming to serve before the tabernacle and serve there, we see they are redeemed by the sons of Levi. So the firstborn of all the tribes are swapped out and concentrated around the tribe of Levi. They are the ones that will serve in the tabernacle, not the firstborn among all of the tribes. So what we might be seeing here brewing for quite some time, even generationally, is a rivalry among family. As God's revelation starts to play out, God has chosen leaders different than natural order. And it just so happens that Korah, Dathan, and Abiram camped together on the south side of the camp. So maybe they've had some time to talk. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram are suspicious and suspect that Moses and Aaron have carved out their own position of power, which they think they have equal or greater right to. But if we've been paying attention in the Bible, we see over and over again that God is not bound to follow natural order. And often, he chooses in spite of it. We see the younger over the older many times in God's choosing. And the issue here with these men is ultimately with God, although they focus the blame on Moses and Aaron. Moses says, your charge is against God. What is Aaron? So we see their astounding wickedness here. They disregard the choosing of God. And they say to Moses and Aaron, you guys have gone too far. Their plea is that everyone is holy. The Lord is among them. At the same time, they're saying, we want to lead. We want to be elevated, and we want to lead. And they hide it among everyone's, why have you exalted yourself above the people? We want to bring them down so that they can exalt themselves up. So they disregard the choosing of the Lord. They are suspicious. They suspect that Moses and Aaron seek to punish and kill the men that have confronted them and exposed this plot. They say, will you put out the eyes of these men? I think it's an expression to say, hey, it's clearly seen what you're doing. Are you going to hide it? Are you going to cover it up? Are we bringing these men in and so that you're going to take them out or punish them and silence them? So they're deeply suspicious of what they're doing. They think Moses and Aaron are just bringing power to themselves and striking down any challenge to it. They're suspicious of what's going on. And then they give a jaw-dropping account here of what has transpired. Hear their words again. They say, is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you must also make yourself prince over us? A land flowing with milk and honey is almost exclusively used for the promised land that God is bringing his people to. And here, the wicked rebellion describes Egypt that way. Moses, you brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to starve us and kill us and rule over us in the wilderness. This is absolutely stunning that is their description of what is going on. And we see here the power of sin and unbelief. There's two scenarios here, I think, two main scenarios we can see here. Either we have men who have been jealous through this kind of generational rivalry, this frustration of what God's doing and been doing, that this whole time, despite God's provision, over and over again, only see it negatively and see the opportunity to overthrow Moses and Aaron. They've just been seeing it that way the whole time. They brought us out of the land. They brought us here. They killed us. They don't do this. They're ruling over us. Either they've been seeing that the whole time, despite all of what God has been doing, which is deeply wicked, and is unbelief, and they're unchanged by all God's examples of grace. Or we see sin and unbelief that is so potent that these men change their opinion so quickly. So quickly they see it all different now because they don't like the circumstances they're in. Their unbelief darkens them to all God has done. And in borderline blasphemy, they say, "You brought us out of Egypt, a land flowing with milk and honey." Whatever it may be, or a mix of these two, it's astounding the power of sin and unbelief to so quickly change our view on all that God has done, or see his grace over and over and over again and be unmoved by it. And there's a word for us here. Be careful that you do not get caught up in the sins of others. It started probably with Korah, and he brings others in, and he brings others in, and there's this whole assembly against God. Gossip, slander, grumbling, these are made to spread. You may not start it. Don't join in it. Don't get entangled into the sins of others. Kids, don't get entangled into the sins of others. If you see them doing something they should not do not join in them. And so we see a few men in the camp, maybe talking at night, who knows, ends up with 250 well-known leaders contending with Moses and Aaron, and this sin that they have joined in will lead to their demise. So the rebellion with these leaders come, and this scene takes place in two different places with two slightly different challenges, and the Lord will respond with two fitting judgments. We've got the 250 here with Korah that are before the temple. Moses said, "Come, bring your censers." They do. And then you've got Dathan and Abiram that said, "We're not listening to you. We're not coming up." And so they're back in the camp at their tents. So we got these two different locations, and God will respond in two different ways. So one challenge is to Aaron and his priesthood by Korah, a Levite. He wants to be the priest. And Dathan and Abiram of the tribe of Reuben, they want to lead, or at minimum don't want Moses to lead. They don't want him to be prince over them. They're done listening to what he says. You want us to come up? We're not coming up. And as the stage is set in these two places, the glory of the Lord appeared to the congregation. The Lord tells Moses and Aaron, "Separate from the people so that I may consume them." Moses pleads for the people and said, "Will you kill all these people for one man's sin?" And so God tells him to command the people to separate. So Moses goes down to Dathan and Abiram, their households, their camp, away from the tabernacle, and goes and speaks to the people there. The people separate, and then Moses says, "Hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and that it's not been of my own accord. If these men die, as all men die, or if they're visited by the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive to Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord." And immediately as Moses finishes speaking, the ground opens up and swallows these men and all that belongs to them. Those who desire to exalt themselves up above Moses, above God, he brings them down. And at the tent, fire comes out. These men bring an offering, say, "We can do this, we can be priests, all are holy, we can come before God, we are clean." They are consumed by a fire because they brought what they ought not to and stepped into a position that they were not to be in. So we see two different positions and two different judgments. God could have done it all with fire. He could have done it all off the ground. Yet I think he's communicating what is the specific rebellion here and a just and fitting judgment in light of it. So this was a terrible, terrible day in Israel. A significant rebellion against God with many leaders, the camp starting to fall apart, experience wrath directly from God. God defends Moses and Aaron. And you would think that the people now would see, but it's about to get worse. Verse 41. "But on the next day, all the congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and against Aaron and said, "You have killed the people of the Lord." The very next day, those who survived put their lot in with those who were judged. There's a theme here that's going on as you read it. It talks about Korah's assembly, Korah's company, Korah's camp, those who belong to Korah. There's a challenge here. There's the people of God and there's the people of Korah. Which one is God pleased with? And on the very next day, the people cry to Moses and Aaron and say, "You've killed the people of God." And the glory of the Lord appeared. God tells Moses and Aaron to separate from the people, and a plague starts in the land. Moses commands Aaron to light a censer from the altar, and he runs into the midst of the people to make atonement for them. He ran and stood between the living and the dead, and the plague stopped. And when the plague had subsided, he returned to Moses, and 14,700 died on that day, in addition to all those who were killed just the day before. This is a scary thing. Our hearts have the same seeds of sin and unbelief as Israel in the wilderness. They have the same capacity for wickedness and slander and unbelief. If not for the grace of God, we would fall into the same suspicion, the same grumbling, the same self-deception, the same unbelief. Our ability to deceive ourselves should be terrifying. And apart from God's grace and work, that is the capacity of your heart. You need to see that. You need to understand that. And when you do, the grace and rescue of Jesus looks like amazing news. We then understand the power of the gospel for salvation. It was no small thing to save you. It took supernatural power for God to overcome your sin, your heart, so that you may be alive to see and believe in him and not have eyes that are so blind to the grace and provision of God over and over again displayed to you. So death is all over the camp of Israel, but God is committed to his people. And in chapters 17, 18, and 19, we see three provisions for Israel which bring hope and stability. We'll see one kind of focuses around the priesthood. We'll see some mainly focused around the Levites and that whole tribe, and then a provision for the rest of the camp, everybody else. Chapter 17, summarize that up briefly. God reaffirms leadership to the priesthood in the camp. So this was the passage that was read by Tyler. He reestablishes that the order for Israel is good. The wheels have been coming off. It was all falling apart, and God reaffirms and reestablishes this order in the midst of chaos. He does not abandon his plan or try something different. He reestablishes again the order in the community that was there prior and brings back shape and form and stability and blessing to his people. So we see the 12 staffs that are brought, one for every tribe. Aaron's is placed among them. Moses takes them. He puts them inside the tent overnight. The leaders consent, so they say, "We'll do this. We'll give you these staffs representing the 12 tribes." And they go in, and in the morning they bring them out. And behold, Aaron's staff. It budded, and it sprouted, and it flowered, and it bore fruit. Aaron's staff alone is chosen. It's the only one that buds. And God says, "Put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony, to be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you may make an end of their grumbling against me, lest they die." So God graciously gives the people a sign of his chosen leadership. And it's a perpetual sign that they're to keep that will hold back the grumblings of the rebels so that they don't die. This is much like the example that we passed over. They take the censers and they pound them into this cover for the altar. That's this sign to remind the people that no one can come, not a common person can come here, not a foreign person can come here. Only those that the Lord has chosen can come before the altar. And so even in that judgment, the Lord gives a sign. And here he gives a sign. He says, keep this for the rebels so that they don't die, as a perpetual reminder of who God has chosen. These signs don't remove the wickedness in Israel, but they're almost described as they're holding back the waters, stopping it from breaking through to cause death in the camp. And so, one, we see God reestablishing the order of the camp here through the priesthood. Two, in Numbers 18, he reaffirms the duties of all the Levites, that whole tribe. Numbers 18, 1 through 3 describes this briefly. It says, so the Lord said to Aaron, you and your sons and your father's house with you shall bear iniquity connected with the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you shall bear iniquity connected to the priesthood. So again, Aaron and his sons, the priesthood, Aaron and his sons, and the sons of his brothers, the whole tribe, will bear the iniquity of the sanctuary. With you bring your brothers also, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, that they may join you and minister to you, while you and your sons with you are before the tent of the testimony. They shall keep guard over you and over the whole tent, but shall not come near to the vessels of the sanctuary or to the altar, lest they and you die. So the Levites will serve along with the priests. They will guard and help and bear the burden together. There's still the distinction here, but he's saying you will serve alongside your brothers. They will help you in the work. There's mutual responsibility here. Failure in this duty can cost the life of both of them, of the priests and the Levites. And so the burden is raised here, and there's a mutual burden here. It says, serve in this way, guard one another, help one another, minister in this way. Stay away from it, lest both of you will die. And we see that they serve as a buffer between God and the camp. God also in here gives provision to the Levites as a whole, because they would not have an inheritance in the land. And so they are provided for by what is brought to the Lord through sacrifices and offerings and contributions. And as we zoom forward to Numbers 35, we'll get there, we see the fulfillment of this as they're given cities throughout the land. But they're not given their own inheritance. They're not given their own portion. And this sounds familiar. This sounds like Genesis 49. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And so we see the fulfillment of what God spoke, this prophetic blessing in Genesis 49, that this warring people, I think some negative connotations in there, their wrath is cruel, will be scattered among the people of Israel. But we also see that they stood with Moses at the golden calf, and they were ordained to this work, this burden and privilege of serving before the tabernacle. And so we see in some senses a redemption of this. These wicked warring men that stood with the Lord, and now their camp is scattered, like it was said, but it's scattered for the blessing of the people around them as they serve before the tabernacle as Levites. And so, in chapter 18, we see the reaffirming the duties of the priests, Levites. We see instruction there, and we see provision for them as a camp because they don't have their own inheritance. Their portion will be from the Lord. And in chapter 19, God provides purification from death for all to enter back into the camp. Numbers 19, 2 through 5 says this. This is a statute of the Lord, of the law that the Lord has commanded. Tell the people of Israel to bring you a red heifer without defect, in which there is no blemish, on which a yoke has never come. And you shall give it to Eleazar the priest, and it shall be taken outside the camp and slaughtered before him. And Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle some of the blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. And the heifer shall be burned in his sight. Its skin, its flesh, its blood, with its dung shall be burned. Now, there's a little bit of mystery behind all that's going on here. Like in face value, these ashes were mixed with water to help purify and cleanse people so they come back into the camp. So that much is clearly true. There's a lot of potential symbolism in here that's befuddling to people. The people that serve it are made unclean by it, but the ashes make other people clean. There's also some similarities here to the Day of Atonement sacrifice, that the action here is outside the camp. And they both are sacrifices and offerings of entrance rites. So the Day Atonement sacrifice was to cleanse the priest so that he may enter into the most holy place. And the red heifer ashes here burned were so that those who had come near to death may be cleansed and returned back into the camp. So entrance rites, cleaning to enter back in. Priest to the most holy place, the congregation back within the camp, in the Lord's camp. And so we see some similarities there. On face value, we see the Lord provides a way for those that are in and among this death to be clean, to come back into his camp. He provides that for the congregation here. And as we close this morning, we need to return back to the miracle of Aaron's staff flowering and what that means for us, right at the heart of this passage. For Israel, God is saying, only Aaron and his sons may come near me. Aaron's staff buds, shoots, blossoms, and bears fruit. The other staffs remain dead sticks. There aren't many ways into the presence of Yahweh. There aren't many ways to God, only through the sacrifice of sin mediated through whom God has chosen. And when Israel saw this, they responded with fear. Behold, we are all done. Will we all die? And so they saw this as potentially a condemnation of them. But also, we see that God will bless all through Aaron and his sons. Them coming near God was not for them alone, but for all the people. It was not a sign of death to these other leaders. It was a sign of life for all through the mediation of the Levites, through Aaron, through the priests. Aaron will stand in the gap for the congregation between death and life for them. It sounds like a movie scene, but it wasn't. He runs out there and stands between the plague and the people yet alive. He stands in the gap for God's people to make atonement for them. There's another description in the Bible where we see a description of branches and blossoms and fruit, almond fruit, and it's the golden lampstand with its 7 branches and cups like almond blossoms. The lampstand gave light to the holy place and shined on the 12 loaves of bread that represented the 12 tribes. The priests were also, as we saw earlier in Numbers, to put the name of the Lord, Yahweh, on his people by saying, "May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you." Aaron's staff shows once again that the Lord, through his priests, will abundantly bless the people, that he will shine on them. There is abundant life and blessing still offered to the people of Israel. This wasn't a condemnation of them. It was a blessing through Aaron, through the Levites, to all of the congregation there. God has not left his people. He will still dwell in their midst. He will hold back their sin until one day he conquers and removes it for good. And we have, through Jesus, that greater reality. Jesus stands in the gap for us between life and death. But more than just holding back sin and death, he defeats it. God will bless us and keep us and make his face to shine upon us, but only through the mediation of Jesus. Jesus is the only way back to God. Israel's problem wasn't their circumstances, it was their unbelieving hearts. Better food won't make them believe. Better land won't make them believe. More rescues from wrath over and over won't make them believe. And apart from Christ, our hearts are the same. But God, through Christ, has given us new hearts. And because of this, we will make it through our own wildernesses. We won't make it because God gives us favorable circumstances, but because we have faith in the Son of God who loved us and died for us. The only way to be reconciled to God is through Jesus Christ. And that's what brings us to this table. That's what this table represents. Jesus' sacrifice that cleanses our consciences and gives us new hearts. Hebrews 9 says exactly this as it looks back to Numbers 19 and this purification of the flesh. Hebrews 9 says this, "For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify for the purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our consciences from dead works to serve the living God." His life, death, resurrection is for you. If you believe in Jesus, you are welcome to this table with us. So this is a meal for Cities Church and is for all who are covered and cleansed by the blood of Jesus. But if you are not there yet, we ask that you would just let the elements pass so that you do not proclaim something that you do not believe and bring judgment upon yourself. We will serve the bread first. All the bread is gluten-free. You can retain it, and then we will eat together after it's been passed. His body is true bread. Let us serve you.